At precisely 11:43 a.m. on June 7, 1692, a massive earthquake caused the Jamaican seaside town Port Royal to sink into the ocean in the blink of an eye. How Port Royal became a sunken city is a fascinating story, with the city's history every bit as interesting. Today, scientists consider Port Royal one of the most important underwater archaeology sites in the world. Welcome to Intrigued Mind, where today we will explore Jamaica's sunken city, Port Royal. Port Royal is the only sunken city in the world that was destroyed in modern times by a natural disaster. But what went on there before the sea swallowed it up? Port Royal was founded in 1494 by the Spanish. The site itself lies on Jamaica's south coast and was an ideal harbor where up to 500 ships could drop anchor. By the 17th century, the Caribbean was considered the Wild West for Europe during the golden age of piracy, when privateers and pirates alike had a huge amount of control over the economy, and society itself was one of debauchery. Port Royal was by this time under the control of the British, as England had seized Jamaica from Spain in 1655. One of the first buildings constructed by the English in Port Royal was Fort Charles, which was built as a defense against the Spanish retaking the city. It was one of the few buildings that withstood the earthquake that sank much of the city, and it still stands today. The British Crown employed men to patrol the waters and keep the Spanish at bay. These men were commissioned by the Crown and were called privateers. The men who did this work without royal endorsement were called pirates. Port Royal was their sanctuary, and as a result, the city was a wicked place where sex, gambling, and boozing was the order of the day. It had a population of 6,000 to 7,000 people, making it the largest city in the New World, even bigger than Boston. The privateers and pirates of Port Royal were so successful and brought in so much liquid money that the city had more cash flowing through the hands of its citizens than London itself. The most well-known privateer was Captain Henry Morgan, a Welshman, whom the famous brand of rum was named after. Speaking of rum, the favored tipple was called Kill Devil rum, where rum was mixed with gunpowder. People drank from morning to night, frequenting the taverns and brothels that counted for every 1 in 4 buildings in the city. The highlight of Captain Morgan's career was his assault on Old Panama City, where the Spanish treasury was housed. Along with gold and silver plate and jewels, Morgan and his crew brought 750,000 pieces of eight back to Port Royal. Captain Morgan's star rose high as a privateer for the British Crown, and so successful was his career as a privateer that he was knighted by King Charles II and was made governor of Jamaica. However, this tactical genius was eventually brought low by the city where he made his name and fortune, and Captain Henry Morgan died from complications related to his alcoholism. But he went down in history as one of the most memorable characters in the history of Port Royal before the earthquake of 1692 partially destroyed it. A survivor and eyewitness to the 1692 earthquake that rocked Port Royal was a man called Edmund Heath. He wrote, "The earth opened up and swallowed many people before my face, and the sea I saw came mounting in over a wall, upon which I concluded it impossible to escape." The morning of the earthquake, the sky was a strange brassy color and the sea was glassy. The air was heavy and sultry. Other eyewitnesses described the earth cracking open and clumping shut again, like a terrifying, gigantic mouth in which people were swallowed alive. Some unfortunate people were trapped at the waist or up to the neck in the earth. One lucky man, a Mr. Louis Galdi, was swallowed by the earth, then spat back up again and out into the sea, where he was later rescued by a boat. Today, it is estimated that this quake measured 7.5 on the Richter scale. It is also estimated that 1,840 buildings slid into the sea in a matter of seconds. The reason why the earthquake literally swallowed most of the city whole in the blink of an eye was because Port Royal was built on a strip of land composed of sand that lay on top of a water table that was 1 to 2 feet deep. Therefore, no foundations could be dug for Port Royal's buildings. When the earthquake hit, the sand became liquefied due to the high water table, turning into quicksand. Buildings, roads, people, and animals were immediately sucked into the ground. 2,000 people, 1/3 of the population, were killed that fateful day, with many more dying in the coming weeks due to the pestilential conditions from the rotting corpses left behind. To make matters worse, a tsunami hit not long after the earthquake, and it dragged parts of the city not taken by the earthquake out to sea. 33 acres of land were lost, 4 out of 5 forts were destroyed, and the cemetery where Captain Henry Morgan had been buried 4 years earlier was washed out to sea. The bodies rose to the surface to join those 2,000 souls who perished in the earthquake. Not surprisingly, looting began right away, with witnesses describing the living cutting the rings off the fingers of the dead. Another witness described a garish scene where dead bodies that were pinioned from the waist down in the debris, with their heads still visible, became a feast for the local dog population. Clergymen who looked down at this city of sin considered the earthquake a punishment from God for the wicked lifestyle of its inhabitants. Port Royal was also hit by hurricanes and fires after the earthquake of 1692, and not surprisingly, many of its inhabitants moved on to Kingston, which would become the capital city of Jamaica. Port Royal's halcyon days were over. Modern-day scientists recognize the archaeological and historical value of the Port Royal site, likening it to a modern-day Pompei. Port Royal is the only sunken city in the New World, and due to its high level of preservation, it is unique. In 1959, nautical archaeologist Edwin Link led an expedition to survey the sunken city of Port Royal under the auspices of the Royal Geographical Society and the Smithsonian Institute. It was during this expedition that it became clear the precise time at which the earthquake struck. Link and his team recovered a pocket watch from the sunken city, and its hands were frozen in time at 11:43. Edwin Link's contribution to the exploration of the Port Royal site paved the way for the work of Robert MARX, an underwater archaeologist who recovered some incredible artifacts from the Port Royal site 5 years later. In 1964, it was decided that Port Royal would undergo development to turn it into a tourist destination. This included dredging the waters where the sunken city lay. Marx knew that the time had come to do a proper survey of the site before it was too late. So, with the permission of the Jamaican government and UNESCO, for 4 years, he and his team retrieved and cataloged a wealth of items from the seafloor, 25 feet beneath the surface. Marx estimated that his findings accounted for a mere 5% of the treasures that lay within the sunken city. Marx found artifacts that dated as far back as 1000 CE, which belonged to the Arawak, the indigenous people of the Caribbean. Religious figurines made from stone and wood of their gods, and weapons made of jade were retrieved from the site, which indicates that the people of the Caribbean traded with other groups as far away as Guatemala. One startling discovery from the privateer era of Port Royal was that of a metal syringe that was used to treat venereal diseases in men. An analysis of this syringe's contents showed that it contained a mixture of molasses and lime juice, which was inserted into the urethra. Lead weights were recovered that had incorrect measurements carved into them, indicating that the salespeople of Port Royal were cheating their customers. Perhaps the most precious find is now preserved at the Institute of Jamaica, an actual wooden treasure chest containing 3,000 pieces of perfectly preserved silver. Objects have been brought to the surface for preservation, which demonstrate that Port Royal was a place of religious tolerance. Catholic, Quaker, Protestant, and Jewish artifacts have been retrieved from the site. Thanks to the work of Robert Marx and his team, the dredging of the harbor was halted, thus preserving this remarkable site for future exploration of the intriguing sunken city of Port Royal. From 1981 to 1990, Donny Hamilton led a team from the Institute of Nautical Archaeology on a 10-year-long project in which they made videos and took photos of the site. Entire buildings were preserved in the earthquake because they sank vertically. Some of the buildings discovered were a tavern, a cobbler's shop, and private residences. Artifacts brought up during this phase of Port Royal's excavation include Japanese weaponry and Chinese porcelain, which are a testament to the city's history as a trading hub. Pearl earrings and gold wedding rings are evidence of the wealth of its citizens, and guns, cannons, and ammunition tell of the city's pirate past. Hamilton's expedition, which wrapped up in 1990, was the last excavation of the sunken city of Port Royal. One can only imagine what other treasures lay hidden in the sunken city of Port Royal, just waiting to be discovered. For more videos on the most amazing forgotten parts of our history, be sure to subscribe to the Intrigued Mind channel, like the video, and leave your suggestions in the comments below.